Okay, welcome everybody. I'm so delighted to have the team from Sacred Roots on Beyond the Trip podcast. We've been talking about doing this for a little while, and I'm really delighted that today we're making it work. So, welcome. Um, I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourselves just briefly before we start so people know who's on the call as well. So, whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. Lucky first. My name is Carlie Atkinson, and I'm a Bundjalung woman, and also a Yemen woman. Yemen country is up at Dawson River. Um, I'm the CEO of Wuurrk, which is a culturally informed and trauma integrated healing training organisation, and of course, also involved in Sacred Roots.
Yeah, beautiful. Can't wait to hear
I'll
about
go
that, Carly.
second.
Yeah, go, Jim.
I'll go second. My name is Jem, and I'm a proud Bundjalung woman also. I have lots of mixed heritage, and I'm one of the co-founders of IPAT, Indigenous Psychedelic Assisted Therapies. I also share many Indigenous wellness practices, including Wuurrk, and also one of the founding members of Sacred Roots.
Thank you, Jem. Claire, do you want to go
After
next?
you, Malay.
All right, I'm Mallie, and my heritage is Anglo-Australian, Scottish, Irish, and English, and Chinese, Malaysian. I was born in Nam in Melbourne and now live on Bundjalung country, and I'm one of the founders and the coordinator of the Sacred Roots Project.
Thanks, Melai.
Hi, I'm Kirt Mallie. I'm a proud Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander man. I am a Kararig and Mawaggle descendant from the far north of Queensland up into the Torres Strait Islands. And I'm also a founder of IPAT. I am a Wiyali facilitator, a cultural educator, spiritual teacher, and also another co-founder of Sacred Roots.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And listeners will remember that Gemstone and Kurt came on to the podcast a little while ago to talk about iPad. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, I definitely recommend having listened to that one as well. And you're all very, doing such amazing projects and doing a number of different projects. So maybe we can have a bit of a chat about Wuurrk and Wayapa Wuurrk, Sacred Roots, and IPAT, because in a way they're kind of all linked together, and there's a fair bit of flow between these projects. I'd love to hear you reflect on that.
Do you mind if I just say a little thing before we start?
Love that. Yes.
Yeah. Look, I think it's pretty exciting because really all of these projects, so Wuurrk, as you mentioned, Wayapa Wuurrk, Sacred Roots, and IPAT, they're really deeply interconnected. And I was thinking about it before we came on, and I saw it like branches, I guess, from the same tree, drawing life from shared roots of healing and reciprocity, and of course, the important one, connection to country. And even though Wuurrk is where my heart work is, which was founded by my mum, Emeritus Professor Judy Atkinson, it's grounded in culturally informed and trauma integrated healing. Now that brings together Indigenous knowledge systems, ceremony, storytelling, and of course support for deep trauma recovery. And what I want to say about Wayapa Wuurrk, which I know some of our facilitators, and including myself now, has been trained with Wayapa Wuurrk, it really complements this by reawakening, I guess, our connection to the earth through movement and mindfulness and cultural practices. So it's really deeply embedded. And Sacred Roots emerged as a natural flow from that work. It's a place where Western research and Indigenous wisdom really meets on equal grounds. And it's about holding that space for sacred reciprocity. I think in Indigenous thinking, what we think about is that flow is not linear. It's circular, and like the seasons or the tides or the songlines, these projects actually connect and speak to each other. They support each other, and they create really a whole web of healing that I reckon that's bigger than any one of us.
Beautiful,
Well,
Carlie.
Beautiful, yeah. Absolutely agree with Carlie. And I was thinking about it too, Carlie, where just like we understand the interconnectedness of everything, all these projects that all of us are involved in, I love that analogy, like the branches of the same tree, because they all complement each other and they do actually draw strength from each other. I don't think any one of those things has anything missing, but they help to hold each other. But even more beautifully, they really can be the bridge for Western frameworks, those missing pieces of the puzzle that we often see looking through the world through an Indigenous worldview. Um, that some of these pieces that are missing, and not only are they missing, a lot of the Western therapists are now voicing that they're really yearning. So that's really where these projects come into play in this space.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think I can't wait to hear about some of the work that you've been doing with some Western therapists. But Kirt, do you want to share any reflections on that point, or Mallie?
Just second and third what Arnie Carlie and Sissy Gem was talking about of the interconnectedness of the work that we do, although they are different uh, modalities in a sense, they all definitely complement each other, and it was something that we were able to offer to clinicians from an Indigenous perspective, the way of trauma integrated healing approach. Especially in Peru, it was something that we even discussed the whole time of how well it works, and definitely um, enhances everything that we're doing in this space.
Great, beautiful. And Mallie, do you want to add anything there, or?
Look, what I will say to that, and I'm so grateful for what Carlie, Jem, and Kirt have shared, because it kind of speaks to, as a difficult with the terminology, but, as a non-Indigenous person, I know we're all Indigenous to this earth, but, sort of not from a living Indigenous tradition at these current times, that in one of the ways, sort of how Sacred Roots emerged was from this web of relationship. And for me personally, having learned so much from people who are still carrying these living Indigenous traditions and wisdoms, and sharing them with so much generosity and wisdom. And Carlie, Jem, and Kirt, this is the work they do. So, for me, and this is where I think the place is for, Western and non-Indigenous people, is to create relationships and build bridges so that we can learn and help to, share and learn together. So, I would never speak, in terms of speak on behalf of those traditions or the wisdoms or what I've personally had the opportunity to learn here in Australia or with the people I've been working in Peru. But what an amazing opportunity to support the bridging of relationships and the sharing of that wisdom more widely.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a lot of interest in the clinical Western psychedelic space in working together with Indigenous people and Indigenous wisdom and knowledge. And so it's really wonderful to hear about all these different projects, particularly about the way that Sacred Roots are bringing those things together and holding them and bridging that space. And it is relationships key, isn't it? In any kind of work in life, it's kind of one of the most important fundamental things. I guess one of the reasons I started the podcast is to build relationships with different people and to kind of bring a network together of quite people doing different things, but interesting, curious things, all in this space from all over the world, really. So tell us, like, Sacred Roots was created from a shared value space, and you've shared a little bit about, that beautiful image of being to branches of the tree, all those different projects that you have worked with. Carlie. But what about Sacred Roots? So tell us how it was actually born, because I actually don't know the backstory, and I'd love to hear how it came about. How did you actually meet? Whatever you want to share about that, how the relationships began. Yeah.
I mean, I can kick that off and then hand over to Mallie, who really sort of pulled it all together. But what I can say is all of us on the team of Sacred Roots clearly came together because we have a shared belief that healing is sacred work. And I'll let everyone else talk about that a little bit more. But, we're all really walking our own paths of decolonizing and reconnecting and remembering. And that's something we shared in common. And our shared values, I just want to say, are rooted in respect for Indigenous knowledge, as I mentioned before, in reciprocity, in giving back to the community, in giving back to the lands where we learn. We always say that the country is our lead facilitator, and also in understanding that true wellness is not just about individual healing, it's actually about collective transformation. That's a really key point. And, we're also united, I believe, by desire to hold a cultural container for conversations around psychedelics and trauma healing that importantly honours ancient practices, but also while being mindful of the modern challenges. So it's really about walking gently between those worlds and creating spaces that importantly feel safe and inclusive and grounded in spirit.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carlie. Yeah, that kind of that bridge between the two worlds is very important, and I think that idea, I think we spoke in our pre-chat a while ago about kind of creating some balance between the two, which I think is really important as well. Mallie, do you want to share some now?
Yeah, thanks, Carlie. So, I mean, really, I would say that how Sacred Roots was born was from our existing relationships and the shared, that also were born out of our shared values. Um, I've had the privilege and the honor to work with Carlie and with Wuurrk over the years, and was already connected with Jem and Kirt and knew about the amazing work that they were doing with IPAT. And the other part of the relationship is that I've been working with the maestra in the Andes in Peru for a number of years quite deeply. And on one of my visits over there, sort of felt, my friends and colleagues who are here on this call there. And I thought, wow, knowing the incredible work that they're doing in the psychedelic assisted therapy space in Australia and really championing the inclusion and the honouring of Indigenous knowledge and reciprocity, that there was just that little curiosity. Maybe they'd be interested in coming over here and also meeting and learning and exchanging with people who are working with, sacred plant kin in very alive traditions in Peru. And so sort of just put the word out there, and it's like, what are you, would you be interested? And it was from those conversations and, the shared vision and the shared values that we started to dream up the Indigenous Cultural Exchange, which was our first visit in May 2024. So, and I'll pause there and then I'll let the others speak to experience.
That's great. And that was, I would say that was the first sort of time that I started to hear about you and the work that you were doing was when, and I'd love to hear about how that was, the cultural exchange in Peru in May 2024, when, so whoever wants to start and share a little bit for the listeners who might not know about that, because there's people tuning in from all over the world, and how did it come about? How was it? What would you like to share about that?
I'm happy to jump in first on that. So, as Mallie said, she'd been building this relationship with Maestra Cecilia for many years. And when she shared some of her ideas and visions for Sacred Roots, I personally just thought it was something that I really wanted to be a part of, because stepping into the psychedelic assisted therapy space in Australia, I immediately recognised that that was something that was really missing, the sacredness and the ceremony that just wasn't able to be held in the mental health space here. So last year when we went across, it really was what we often call a unifying of hearts. So it was really just meeting and building those relationships and being able to, what we ended up having this beautiful cultural exchange. So not only in Chavin in the Andes, we also, on that same trip, we visited the jungle of Iquitos, so two different lineages. And yeah, very, very unique and very different in the way that their unbroken lineages of their connections to medicine and ceremony were. But we were able to go over there and share a bit about what we do here. And, you know, the humility of those two teachers was just incredible. They were just as interested to hear about what we're doing here, as well as so generously teaching us in some of their ways. So we knew that that first visit last year was really just that initial relationship building. And, you know, it was so wonderful to be able to go back again this year and this time, you know, the next step of that vision by being able to take Australian therapists with us.
Yes, and I can't wait to hear how that was because I haven't managed to connect with all of you since then. This is the first time, so I'm really excited to hear about that soon. But I wonder if anyone else has any reflections on that the first time that you went over there, on that cultural exchange, which also, you know, if we think about networks and relationships, and Mallie and I have known each other in different professional capacities for many years, and Simon Raphael, who also has a very strong connection to one of the places that you went, is someone who I know really well, and that's how I met you, Jem. And so there's really that web of interconnectedness that feels really present on this call. I just wanted to name that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, I might just finish off by saying that that was how we had our second connection in the jungle with Don Rono Lopez, was through my connection with Simon Raphael and Anaya Science. So he'd been working with Rono for several years, and through that connection. So again, it's, you know, these wider webs of relationships that are exactly what we've just been talking about. So and then once we were able to meet Rono and build our own connections and relationships, it just you know, it was just something really beautiful that was able to grow. And I think, you know, a big part of these building relationships is these warm referrals too, you know, and you know, and I think that is something that's really missing, in the sense that people that want to make these connections haven't had the time, or they haven't taken the time to build these deep relationships. So I think that's something that's really unique to Sacred Roots in this space as well.
Yeah, it's really important, Jem, and the word relationships will come up time and time again. And in fact, it's one of the 7 R's in Wuurrk that we consider our law, as in LORE, relationships, relatedness, and none of this work can happen without those relationships, and also making sure that we keep those relationships going. Really, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Instead of kind of taking other people's knowledge and doing with it what we please, and which happens in this space. It absolutely happens in this space. We're actually saying, let's build a relationship with the cultural holders of that knowledge in reciprocity.
And honouring them for the work that they've carried for generations. And I think that's something that we really wanted to step into with Sacred Roots, but also even with the work that we're doing in IPAT as well, is really bringing that acknowledgement back to the fact that psychedelic medicines is Indigenous knowledge. So for me, it was very important to be able to go to some of these knowledge holders with humility and sit and listen and learn. And yeah, it's been life-changing.
It reminds me of when I went over the first time last year, with the gum trees that stood around the temple there in Chavin. They felt like familiar guardians, I guess. and it felt like the country was whispering to us across the continents. So the relationship felt like it was with the land, the country itself as well.
Yes, I think I saw something about that there was gum trees which people not in Australia we find here in Australia that you connected with over there. That's so beautiful and very appropriate, right? Like it feels like there was a message in that for sure. Oh. Kurt, do you want to share anything? I think we've lost May live for a moment, but hopefully she'll just come back in.
I just wanted to share, as Indigenous people, we obviously know the power of a seed, and it was a really good reminder, especially from Mallie helped us during the trip last year, and by bringing us the group over and creating sacred roots, and but the power of the prayer, the seed that she planted in a sacred site during ceremony, and how much that was amplified and how quickly that was able to manifest. So we were able to do that again this year in those sacred sites during ceremonies to continue to offer these prayers and to plant these seeds, and knowing that we're continuing to cultivate those seeds that have already been planted, and what's coming of that is it's endless. But we're starting to really already, after this short time, start to reap the rewards, and even starting to eat some of the fruits from these seeds. So, and I was thinking as you were all talking earlier, of how me personally, I've been very passionate about creating the most safe and sacred space to do the deepest work possible. Ever since I've gotten down or into this field, working with psychedelics, and but just doing ceremony in general for all types of things, different kinds of initiations and things like that. But when I was on my lonesome, I couldn't imagine, 10 years ago when uh, to be working with such powerful, wonderful, and amazing women that we've all come together, and they're not just collaborating, but we've become family during this whole process.
Mm,
Mm.
mm. I love that, Kurt. I feel the same. And I think that is that what underpins this whole project is the love around it as well. I think it is, people often say a labor of love, but it really is, you know, in service. I feel like I'm really in service, but the love that, is around the project and the work that we do in this space. I think I can't imagine what that would be like without that love and that sacredness that Kurt just talking about. And I have to say that the fears around what's seen in the Western models, where it's so clinical, that love and relationship and connection and nurturing the seeds of a vision, that sacredness just, isn't necessarily present, or there just isn't space for that to be able to be held. And so that was what became, integral in the vision of, IPAT, and therefore also, every one of those areas that all of us are working, that is kind of underpinned with that love and sacredness.
We don't talk about love enough on this podcast. Thank you for bringing it in. I was just
The
I was just thinking,
dirty L word.
I mean, we can't, so this is the key of all of this work, I think. And I was thinking about our conversation a few months ago when we were kind of planning Jem and Carlie, and we did talk about the importance of bringing men and women back together in circle. And I actually, just from my own reflection, like I feel like working in a dyad, usually with a male, has been a huge gift to me from this psychedelic work. I have a deep respect, love, and care for the men that I've worked with, and I've just learned so much about being with that kind of the healed masculine in a way that has been really powerful for me, actually. And I don't think it's always like that, probably, but I feel very grateful and lucky that I've worked with some incredible men, and there's a lot of love in the room.
Mm.
Yeah.
And potentially as well, as you were talking then, Esme, I'm thinking about the fact that we see each other as brother and sisters, in this space. And I think this is the real difference of, walking in Indigenous spaces. It's non-hierarchical. Every single one of us has an equal place in this space. We're just as valued. We all bring our, unique knowledge and gifts. Um, Yet there's no power dynamics that we can often see in those Western frameworks where there's experts in the room and, others, sort of imbalanced with their knowledge or imbalance in how they're valued within the space. Whereas a lot of these Indigenous frameworks, we recognise that every single one of us brings knowledge that's integral to this project.
So true, Jem. And it reminds me, we just, Jem and a few other facilitators, 5 Wuurrk facilitators, just ran a facilitator training on country, a deep dive residential. And it was interesting. One of the things that, or pieces of feedback that I got consistently, Jem, and I'm sure you got that as well, was how deeply we were connected to each other as facilitators. And that deep love was really obvious to all the participants there, and how that helped them feel safe, knowing that we had that deep respect, and that was equal. There was no hierarchy in that relationship, but there's also no hierarchy with the participants in the room either. It's all very, very balanced.
Mm,
Beautiful.
absolutely. And that was one of the first things that we really established this year when we took people to Shavim, when we took the therapists over. The first part of anything that we can do is really creating that safe and sacred space. And a huge part of that is leaving our titles or our roles at the door and stepping into circle as equals. And so that was something, even that first little bit that we're able to bring in for people was something that many had never even experienced in their lives. So from that very first step of stepping into that space, people started to feel like that they could feel at home and they could feel just as valued as everyone else. And as we know, that's a huge part of that healing can only begin when we feel safe enough to be in spaces like that.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear about that, because do you want to share a little bit about that? So you went on your first culture exchange in May 2024, and then this year you've been to Peru with a group of Western psychedelic therapists. Is that right? And so tell us about that. How was it? I'm sure there's lots of things you could share. Um, so yeah, who would like to start?
I can touch a little bit on that, and uh, it was a phenomenal experience to be able to take, these academics and uh, very clinical people into a space that is completely out of their comfort zone, but to remind them of how sacred this work is that we're doing, and it doesn't matter what compound you're working with. Ultimately, we're working with energy, and all energy has spirit. So it's almost, well, it was coming back to, the non-linear dimensions of reality that they cannot quantify, or you cannot necessarily put into a paper, or even put onto, into words. It's something that's got to be directly experienced. So to be able to offer that and to remind people of what we were just talking about earlier, love. It is the foundation of sacredness. It's when we start to access that doorway into those parts of ourselves where the deeper healing actually starts to occur. Because, we can write about it, we can talk about it, but until it's directly experienced and felt in that sense, this is where the magic happens. So it was a great honor to be with this wonderful team, to be able to hold that space for uh, these amazing people to activate their own healing capacity.
Thank you, Kurt. How many people did you take over in the end? How many of you were there in the group?
Those 12 clinicians. It's good to have Mallie back because she
Hi,
can.
Mallie, yes.
Mhm.
Be great for Mallie to
Hi there.
speak
Sorry, I
to.
dropped out.
Yeah.
Big internet issues here today. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I'm just sad I missed the magic that was shared while I was offline. So I think it was 11 therapists. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. 11 therapists, and then Jem, Kirt, and myself as well, and then the team from Peru.
Beautiful. And how did it go? What are your key takeaways? What would you like to share? Whoever wants to go. We can hear you fine now, Mallie, so that's good.
Has Jem shared already a little
You
bit?
share, Mallie. You share, Mallie. We'd love for you to give your feedback on this.
Sure. And it was great. I'm really glad that I heard some of what Kirt was sharing in there. And it was just making me reflect on one of the main conversations I was having with Maestra Cecilia, that she was so excited that there was a group of therapists there and that these ways can start to ripple. And she said time and time again, the most important thing is this transformation from the inside, that they really go in and have their own deep experience, even in the thinking of how best to support people in psychedelic assisted therapy. And this is very much what we saw, and what was so profound, that everybody who was there, they went in and they met themselves with the medicine, with the temple, with the mountains, to do that really deep inner work. And the transformation that's come through that they've shared, during the trip and since we've had a group catch up online, has been so profound, speaking about shifts in worldviews, not feeling like the same person or the same therapist, and then really deep transformations, for many in their own experience and their own personal lives. So for me, it was so profound, and so much was shared about the combination of the knowledge and the wisdom and the experience that was shared from everyone on the team and the place and the traditions that we got to learn from.
I'd probably just follow that by adding that, really part of that vision was to help to be able to inform therapists as they come back to Australia to, these deeply felt lived experiences that they had over there, and these huge shifts on a personal level. Every single person there has said that it really will help inform them to be better therapists, and that is the whole vision of Sacred Roots. We're not just taking people over there for the fun of it. It really is because it builds to our vision of having more connected ways, and sacred ways that psychedelic therapy in Australia is able to move. And so for those 11 therapists, it will help inform them as they come back and they're working back in their spaces.
And I might just add to that too, because I don't know what was shared before, but you just bringing that up, Jem, that this really is the key, and this is why we're at such an exciting moment with psychedelic assisted therapies for MDMA and psilocybin now legal in Australia, and so many therapists really keen to train in it and explore the field and get involved. But as was said, I think it's just so important that it's rooted in the sacred, and it's rooted in grounded Indigenous knowledge and ways. For me, I see so much of the root, kind of the mental health crisis is the lack of connection, or this deep disconnection. And there's so much that's available through the wisdom, that Carlie, Jem, and Kirt, that they're bringing forward, that these maestros and maestros in Peru, they're making it available. They also want to share and inform and help this sacred work be held with a deep reverence and deep personal experience.
Yeah, I think, in in psychotherapy, they talk about like you can really only take someone as far as you've gone yourself in your healing work. And I've spoken about this quite a few times on the podcast, that one of my real concerns in Australia is that in Australia it's actually really hard for people to legally get a felt sense of working with medicine, the medicines that have been rescheduled here, which I think is so key, like in terms of how we do this work, how we support people. There's that piece. And then there's the piece of like the fact that these medicines have those indigenous roots and the sacred roots of these medicines, to use the title of your organization, is such an important thing to hold. So it's really beautiful to hear that you are able to offer some of this to Western therapists. I think it's really, really important. I haven't released it yet, but I just actually last week recorded an episode with Simon Yugler from America, and he lives in Oregon, where they've rescheduled in a really different way. They've legalized psilocybin in a different way, which makes things a lot more straightforward for people to have their own experience. And it was just interesting, kind of chewing over and discussing the tension that I feel around that in Australia. So, yeah, I won't go on a total side quest about that, but yeah.
No, but how important, it's so important. And with the work that we do in Wuurrk, one of the things that we say all the time is that the personal and professional are interlinked. So that fits very much into a psychotherapy type framework as well. But if we can't go in, then it's the capacity to go out with knowledge, the capacity to then go out with deep empathy is just not, it's not available. That's been my experience. But I think what's really important here too is it means ensuring our Indigenous voices, and they're not just at the table, but they're leading the conversations where cultural and spiritual knowledge is required. And I know, and I didn't get the opportunity, by the way, to go over this time, unfortunately, because we'd had a death in the family. So I can't talk, really clearly to the experiences over there. But one thing I do know from talking to Jem and Mallie particularly, and I haven't had a good yarn with Kirt yet, is there was this deep recognition that the land, the ceremony, the cultural protocols are just as important, if not more important, than clinical settings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that with that, Carlie, I think this is the beautiful part of where the framework of Wuurrk and Wayapa and what we're sharing in IPAT actually is able to come in for those reasons of, as you say, the recognizing the ceremony, the sacredness, and the connection to country is foundational in that. Yet there seems to be, there's a huge gap of how Western therapists are able to access that knowledge. And this is where some of these modalities or some of these frameworks that we offer can be a beautiful bridge to offer that for people. And, within Sacred Roots, as those therapists are there experiencing the knowledge from those lineage holders, they're also receiving that training from us. We deliver that training. So as they come back, they really do have a pathway that they're able to start exploring the sacredness within themselves. As Carlie said, going in to be able to go out. So we invite their own sacredness to be able to step forward from their own personal lineages, from their own deep connections with the land where they live, and helping them to nurture and cultivate that. It makes the world of difference, because then we're not looking at any sort of appropriation, because I think when IPAT first started out, that was one of the first talk that we ever did at a conference. Therapists asked us, well, how can we do this without appropriating? So these are really beautiful pathways forward that therapists are now able to access. And we help to, encourage ways for them to nurture their own connection so that the appropriation doesn't happen.
Thank you, Jem. And I'd love to, um, I'd love to hear a little bit about your upcoming trip because you've come back a month ago or so now, maybe 2 months ago, from Peru, but you're actually also planning to return with another group of therapists in December. Is that right? Who would like to share about that?
Go ahead, Jem.
I think did you say for me to share, Mello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll start and then I'd love for you to add to that. I guess I'll just say that the reason that we're going in December is because it's the second lineage. So in May, we went to Chavin with Maestra Cecilia, and December, we're going back to the jungle with Don Rono Lopez. So it really is two different ways, two different lineages, different teachings, and two different, completely different experiences. We already have one therapist that has enrolled to come in December as well because they recognise, that they're going to receive different teachings and really curious about, or just really excited about continuing the work that they started in Chivin. So yeah, I will just touch on that, but I'd love to hand to you, Melee, on some of the experiences will be so different in Iquitos because we're including some other things in that work.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Jem said, it is, I guess, the two main medicines that are used in Peru are the San Pedro Huachuma, the cactus, and then ayahuasca. And there's many different Indigenous peoples and traditions with that medicine as well. But through Simon Raffel, that we had been connected into Don Rono Lopez, we visited last year. Jem and I went back in December, January this year for a month just to deepen in those ways and, for our own experience and learning. And it became very clear then that it would be a wonderful, sort of extension, evolution of Sacred Roots to also be able to support those connections for therapists to learn in this unique, connected way with the Shipibo traditions as well. And one of the things that was so unique there is that Don Rono is an absolute teacher. He's a maestro, and he's been, learned from his grandfather since he was 9. So he's very passionate about sharing his tradition in a way that's really authentic. He said that's actually the most important thing to him. He said, that the world it's in quite a state at the moment, and they know it's like, well, the Shipibo can't, support everybody, but they know the power of their tradition and the medicines. And I'm not talking just about the ayahuasca, but the whole cornucopia of the plants of the jungle and their ways. And he's so passionate about sharing them and really teaching the methods and the tradition, the Icaros treatments. He teaches that in a really clear and accessible way for the Western mind, which is a very rare and unusual skill. And just at the times that we're in, with the crossover of this work and more Western therapists really interested in learning from traditional cultural knowledge holders, that wow, here's a rare being who's really passionate about offering that. And then, of course, the work and the wisdom that the team of Sacred Roots brings, that is held in a really safe and trauma-informed way with additional training and knowledge and practices. So kind of a complete package in a way. I kind of see this as a lot of the things that people don't get in the clinical psychedelic assisted therapy trainings.
It was really different from the first time that when I went over with everyone. The second time that everyone went over, which I wasn't at, as I said, I'd had a family death, is that this time it had been laid with these different trainings. And so there was somatic trainings, there was the Wayapa trainings, there was the Wuurrk training. So there was a real circle of support around it. And so that was our learnings, I guess, from the first time over there, was actually to have those different layers and that circle of support, which unfortunately I wasn't there to experience, but I know that you'll be able to talk to that clearly.
Yeah.
I think what's another thing that's really unique about the jungle, Malai mentioned the treatments, but also the dieta. So learning ways that we can connect deeply with some of these plants that are non-psychedelic. And I think that's something that is, again, we come back to the word relationship, because it's truly helping people to feel these deep relationships that they can start to build with those plant allies. And Rono is just the most remarkable teacher who really just guides people on that journey, but really just not only an incredible teacher, but a humble teacher, because he carries the wisdom of that lineage. He talks about how the plants really are the teachers, and it's just access to knowledge that we know that Indigenous knowledge systems all over the world hold their connections to their local plant kin, as we know they do here on this continent. But to see the wisdom of unbroken lineages of somebody who started from a child, who lives in the jungle, and, as any ailment that comes up with anyone throughout the treatments, he knows exactly what plant to go out and have. So I think for this trip in December, what people will see that's different, regardless, they will have the ceremony with the medicines. But they will also start to be able to build these relationships through his teaching, but also that inner deep felt sense of building the relationship with the plant they're dieting, which will be the Noya Rao, the most incredible tree in the world, or the most revered tree in the Shipibo lineage.
Yeah, I was just going to say I had the honor of spending a few weeks on data with Don Rono prior to going up into the Andes this time. And yeah, just exactly what Jem was saying. It's the working with these other plants that aren't necessarily psychedelic, but ayahuasca is just the cherry on top. From a Western perspective, they hear about this magic jungle juice that people want to go and have, but they totally disregard every other plant, every other compound. And it's not just about the science that's the chemical compounds that are in these plants that can there's nothing that isn't solvable for these maestros and maestras that they know that there is a plant that can cure any dysfunction, disorder, disease. But it's not as simple as just extraction, which is a common Western mindset, just to extract, take what they can from whatever they can. What it's ultimately about is back to spirit, back to the sacredness of the work. But they're able to work with the spirit, and this is what it's teaching us. This is what it's reminding us, and hopefully these clinicians that go and experience, how to truly hold space. Is they're not just great minds holding minds; it's actually spirit holding spirit, and allowing these other things to come into place, where the greatest healing can happen in the greatest way possible.
Beautiful, Kirt. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I think on our science and on the training that Jem and I and Don Rolo are all involved in, and you as well, Kirt, I think is also something that people can check out. And I'll make sure I'll put a link in the show notes to that. It sounds like a really amazing trip. How do people kind of sign up or find out more information?
Yeah, I'd love to share that. So our website is sacredroots.au and all of the information is up there. And I'm sure you'll share that in the show notes as well. But there was one other thing that felt really important that I'd love to share. And just to make really clear that, our intention for taking therapists over is not to sort of, insert these Indigenous traditions, or, that now you're going to learn those and now you come back and apply them in psychedelic assisted therapy here. We know it's not that straightforward, but what this work is about is, we're at such a unique time in the field, and we're all having that conversation. And, this is one of the most exciting things about taking a group of therapists over who are working in the space, is really it's about generating conversations and learning together, and all together discovering, how do we bridge? It's not that now we're just going to take different pieces and extract them from these different traditions, but actually, what's the experience? What are the elements that are the most important here? And where is the crossover? Where is it appropriate to, bring in some of these different ways of being and ways of experiencing and ways of seeing, and then finding and generating how we can do that in our own really reverent and grounded way. So I just wanted to say that, sort of that's one of the other most amazing things about these trips, is the conversations and the generative nature of bringing a group of therapists together, having these experiences.
Thank you, Mallie. That's so important, isn't it? I feel like there's so many of those kinds of conversations happening. People are really trying to work out how to do this really well in so many different ways. And what an incredible opportunity to not only to dive deep into that felt sense of working with medicine and with Indigenous traditions, but also then to come together as a group of people, of humans in this field who really want to do this well. And how do we do that? I've been talking to lots of people about this on the podcast, well, different types of humans sometimes from different countries, but mostly from Australia, because we are in this quite amazing, exciting, and at times nerve-wracking time where I personally do feel a responsibility to really think about how we do this work as safely and as possible, and with as much integrity as possible. So there's lots more I could say about that, but I actually want to give the space to all of you, because I can talk about that another time. Yeah, well, we're coming towards the end of our time together. We've probably got another 5 minutes, I think we can do, if that's all right with everybody. So is there any final points that you would feel like you really would like to share before we wrap up today? I'm sure there's many, but anything final to talk about? And I'll definitely put all the links in the show notes so people can easily find you.
Maybe I would. Oh, you go, Carlie.
So I was just going to say one last thing to kind of sign off, and it's really, as everyone has been talking about, and I think on balance in the PAT space, for me and from listening to everyone here, it feels similar. It's about bringing that Indigenous wisdom and Western science together, and knowing really the first step in that is just starts with listening, really deep listening, Dadidi type listening, and just knowing also that these medicines, they're not just tools. As everyone has said on this podcast, they're sacred, and we need to honour their lineage, while also, and this is really important, building really culturally safe and trauma-informed containers.
Beautiful, Carlie. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think the only thing that I'd like to add is that, these experiences, ultimately, they are a deep human experience. And I think, when we talk about Western models and things like that, we've got to remember that they're systems. Those models and those frameworks are part of a system that can disconnect us from, this deep innate knowing as or yearning as humans. So it really just breaks down all those sort of barriers that can be put around us when we're navigating disconnected systems. So it really is that human experience and deep ways to reconnect to country and to to each other.
Beautiful, Jem. I completely agree. Thank you. Kirt, do you want to share anything before we wrap up?
Just a similar kind of thing, but what I've reminded in other spaces is to really create longevity and sustainability within this space. You need to be reminded of the sacredness of it. And, science can be sacred too. If anything, it is sacred. And we need to truly honor that. And, all sciences, even, psychology is sacred. The work that we do from the most clinical to the most down to earth back to Indigenous ways, that it's all sacred. So to really acknowledge that and to continue to bring that in to the work into this field with integrity, and it's what's going to really keep it going, and we're going to start to see these results as we do tread lightly in both worlds. We can bring it together in a way that it will harmonize, it will be able to synchronize together, because when we first started, it was like, different worlds. How can we walk in this? So it's like stepping in one place and then doing the other, but it's starting to come together in a way that it can work. And through taking certain clinicians and different people through these experiences, then there's a marriage that's starting to happen, that there is a deeper understanding of what it takes to truly hold space in the most integrous way.
Thank you. I was just thinking about, one of the first kind of, I guess, the first elders in the clinical psychedelic research space, if you want to call it that. I don't know if he would like to call it that. Was Bill Richardson. He was one of the first guests on my podcast. His book's called Sacred Knowledge. And so I don't know, I'm just sitting here thinking, I think that the elders that started in terms of the clinical space and the research space were holding that, and then it kind of got cut off at the knees, when the research was shut down. And so it's so important to be bringing that perspective back now. And it's obviously the Indigenous wisdom's been holding that for millennia. So thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful. I'm absolutely delighted that we managed to come together and have this conversation. And I'm so excited for you all to be going to Peru with Don Rolo in December. What an amazing experience. And maybe you'll have to come back on and tell me all about it if I can't come with you. Maybe I will.
Come and join us, Esme.
I would love to. I would love to. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you all have a beautiful day. Mallie, do you want to finish off by saying anything, or you?
No, I mean that we have the opportunity to receive the Indigenous knowledge and wisdom, and very much I'm here as in the listening, as Carlie said, and in the learning and the privilege that it is to be able to do that. So, yeah.
Beautiful.